Hi, my name is Ken Davidian, and welcome to Season 2 of Organization Theory in Space. During this season, I'm creating one video for every chapter in the Oxford Handbook of Organizational Change and Innovation, second edition, edited by Marshall Scott Poole and Andy Van de Ven. In this video, I'm covering Chapter 19 of the handbook, entitled VSR Models of Change as Normative Practical Theory. This chapter will begin with a brief history of evolution models and a description of current work to develop a normative evolution model. Next, we'll talk about how technology processes, routines and strategies, and the role of individuals are influenced for all three internal evolution forces of variation, selection, and retention. The chapter discusses external evolution processes and the attempts to internally balance the variation and selection processes. Finally, the proposed normative model includes the influences of emotion and imagination. Evolutionary models were introduced to management theory in the 1960s and 70s and resulted in three lines of research that were: first, mapping biosocial evolutionary processes to biological processes and levels. This is the line of research that was described in the previous video covering Chapter 18 of this handbook. A second line of research resulted in increasingly abstract and complex evolutionary models. And the third line of research involved theory testing of community-level VSR processes. This chapter introduces a normative and simplified model of evolution focused inside the firm. This IVSR model is intended for use by practitioners, managers, and organizational change agents. It includes increased emphasis on the role of the individual, and it also includes the effects of emotion and imagination on the evolution process. Internal variation processes affect processes of technology development at three levels. The highest level inside the organization is top-level management, and they can influence variation through formal and deliberate processes, such as by conducting research to generate new ideas. The second level is at mid-level management, or at the individual level. Variation at this level can be influenced through the allowance for playfulness, as discussed in the previous chapter. There's also the third level, or emergent variation, describing unplanned discoveries or happenstance combinations of new ideas yielding unforeseen and unplanned benefits. Routines and strategies can be influenced by top-down goal setting at the highest level, for example, through incentive systems or implementation of systems for early detection of unexpected variation. Emergent patterns to influence routines can originate from lower levels. An example of this could be guided evolution, blending top-down support for bottom-up generation of variation. Individuals can have agency when influencing internal variation, although the normative model of evolution does not require it. The guided evolution example above is a good example of the role of the individual in influencing internal variation. Individuals develop skills and social capital based on projects selected by organizations and vice versa. It's been noted that the role of the individual is not necessarily more effective than the role of groups. Internal selection can also have an influence on technology processes. Top-down, there can be a deliberate selection of technologies through formal R&D management systems based on outcome criteria that reflect rational choice models. The system of technology selection might include multiple options in competition, but the competition rules to define a winner probably reflect a political system that may be tacit or hidden, or driven by experienced management choices, thereby influencing the process. Managers at all levels, in fact, can manipulate the selection systems to influence outcomes. Regarding routines and strategies, top management can influence selection through decisions of funding, sanctioning, or approvals. Mid-level management can make deliberate selection actions without top-level direction. For example, through mentoring, placing, and promoting like-minded individuals in management positions throughout the organization. In terms of emergent selection, de facto criteria can be applied without prior specific goals, resulting in selection manipulation. The role of individuals are seen as managers' selection processes through top-down decision-making. Product champions can affect the selection process at various levels, and individuals can use many nuanced methods to influence the selection process. Internal retention processes influence technology evolution in some of the same ways as in the variation and selection stages of evolution. Top-down activities that influence technology retention include repeating a given action to make it as permanent and systematic as possible, reflecting good management theory. Examples of these include quality control or standardization activities. Mid-level or lower-level retention processes act independently of top-down direction by promoting certain projects, impeding certain processes, introducing elements of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Internal retention processes influence routines and strategies also originate from the top-down perspective. Since the days of scientific management, they've been promoting consistent action to achieve goals using tools like incentives, like stock options, bonuses, penalties, ethics, standards, and training. However, contemporary management theory promotes innovation and organizational change in dynamic environments, leading to attempts to do both innovation and organizational change through many different means, such as skunk works and organizational ambidexterity. Ultimately, strengthening both variation and retention in the organization sets the stage for the paradox theory of management actions. Internal retention processes originating from the mid-level of management can affect retention processes using many of the same tools as described above. Mid-level managers can affect retention criteria, thereby avoiding perception of being biased toward an individual project or outcome, or they can slow down or weaken retention processes. These moves are often thought of as one-offs, but they actually may be deliberate and consistently used. Emergent retention microprocesses can result in unplanned retention, resulting in organizational inertia toward repeating past routines, and can include actions based on the logic of appropriateness, sense of identity, or alignment with norms or rules. Finally, individuals can play a role leading formal resistance or persistence efforts using the tools mentioned above. Next, the chapter discusses external evolutionary processes. Tracking and shaping of external variation can be achieved by top-level management through advisory boards, scenario planning, technology roadmaps, research consortia, sponsored research, among many other means. Mid-level managers participate via membership in groups, affiliation with groups, or advocating for specific technologies in groups, etc. Individuals can identify external variation by tracking political, international, or social trends. They can also identify lower-level or emergent trends. Next, there is a linkage between external and internal selection processes, and this linkage across levels is critical. Organizations absolutely influence external evolutionary forces, not to adapt to them, but to co-create external contexts through lobbying, sponsored research, or participation in consortia or other groups. Change agents and individuals also use these tools and methods to affect change. A common paradox in organization theory is the question of exploration versus exploitation, and this translates into balancing variation forces with selection and retention forces. With respect to technology, this expresses itself through the allocation and distribution of resources across a technology or research portfolio. Organizational culture can be affected through the balance of efforts to create or institutionalize change. Again, this is the exploration versus exploitation dichotomy, and expressions of ambidexterity can be seen as attempts to find the balance, but this balance is very difficult to achieve. Using a VSR lens helps find the balance and also helps us identify the microprocesses of VSR. Lastly, the authors discuss the inclusion of imagination and emotion in the normative evolution theory they propose. Emotion impacts social behavior and cognition under certain conditions and can be positive or negative. Variation is impacted by emotions linked to creativity, including feelings of joy, happiness, or enthusiasm, but may also be impacted by negative emotions like frustration, distress, and anxiety, which can help identify situations requiring attention for improvement. Emotions impact selection too, impacting and distorting decision-making in direct contradiction to rational actor models. Emotions linked to in-group bias can result in the not invented here reaction, and change agents can use these emotions to manipulate this selection process. Finally, emotions like nostalgia, rigidity, or inertia can affect retention of existing technologies or routines, holding on to less useful activities longer than warranted. Negative emotions to threats, however, can also trigger change. Imagination can also impact the internal evolution process. Imagination is defined as the act or power of forming a mental image of something not present to the senses or never before wholly perceived in reality. Imagination can affect all three VSR forces in individuals and groups, although again, group imagination may be more effective than individual imagination. Imagination affects variation through imitation, induction, deduction, framing mental stimulation, and analogical reasoning. Imagination can affect both selection and retention through creative synthesis. In any case, all aspects of the influence of imagination on the internal evolution process are under-theorized. In summary, this internal VSR model provides a new and simplified perspective on management theory, supplementing rational actor and political models of planning and control. This view is not widely accepted, offers less control, and may be perceived as abdicating responsibility for guiding the organization through necessary change. This simplified view, however, makes it more practical to implement, especially for change agents, bringing individuals into the VSR process. Adding imagination and emotion into the discussion can improve the accuracy and value of the internal evolution model. Well, that's it for chapter 19. It was hot and cheap and quick. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a good way to actually apply the evolution theory to everyday management routines and actions. And if you like this content, I hope you consider subscribing or hitting the notification bell. And I'll see you in the next episode of OT in Space. Bye. OT in Space was produced by IRL, which stands for Impossible Research LLC. IRL conducts process research on the topics of innovation and industry emergence within the space sector context. IRL also offers services of organization theory consulting, research consulting, and STEAM outreach. This video is intended for educational purposes only.